At 10, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Night series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. Unlike the others, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit on the poster for the Night 3 cutscene, but her face plates are very hard to spot. And she's also almost entirely purple. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica. Her overall body is very slim like the original toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider for birthing purposes, and she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum levels, saying, quote, "A victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she was wearing. Now being manipulated by your sister and mother. Tried spray on tan, still very pale." I relate to that. No matter what I do, I'll always be pale and pasty, okay? But I'm fine with that. However, while she is also a Springlock victim, she's in the suit that she was wearing, therefore she is a Springlock animatronic. Alright, so I'm like, come on. And I'll also be like, what did you do to my girl Chica? Like, I'm sorry, Mommy Kentucky. I didn't mean to. These are transgressions. Keep my wife's name! At 9, Grimfredbear. Grimfredbear is one of the antagonists of Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. He is only active on Night 5 and is found in the left hallway. Grimfredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear, only with his suit glowing a deep purple color while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place. That sounded weird. The inside of the mask, though it appears like there is nothing inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during his jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. This animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that these Shadow animatronics were Springlock victims, which is later confirmed by Scott to be false when stating that only William was a victim of a Springlock failure. But in the museum level of this game, which unlocks after Night 5, it is also revealed that Grimfredbear is a Springlock suit, saying, quote, "Another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear." And at 8, Golden Call. As a human when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, now he is a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical run-down Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is much more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has bugs coming out of basically every hole in the body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets, just dangling there, like my grandfather's tie. He's missing an exosuit on his right foot, and the character is holding a flesh-colored, at least flesh-colored, it might even be flesh-made phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh and blood strands connecting it. Yeah, it's gross. It's a monstrosity. And looking at the age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 years old when he got Springlocked, which is absolutely just horrible. God, that sucks. That would be rough. I would be offended if that happened to me. Like, yo, I'm only 5. What did I do to deserve this?
Number 7. The Amazing Escape. William Afton in the books is much more lucky, or perhaps just more brilliant than his video game counterpart. At least when it comes to dodging Springlocks somehow. Like in the games, he ends up getting Springlocked, but instead of being killed by this experience, he miraculously survives, seeming to somehow pull a Harry Houdini and just escape that. While Charlie activates the Springlocks in the suit he's wearing at the end of the novel Five Nights at Freddy's: The Silver Eyes, we learn in the next book, The Twisted Ones, that the blood found in the scene ends up being analyzed in a lab and found to be fake blood. Finally, in the fourth closet, it is confirmed that William Afton, while harmed, miraculously survived being Springlocked. I don't know how this is possible, but it's a thing that happened. Pretty impressive considering in most other cases, it's pretty much a death sentence. Number 6. Triggered by wriggling off mini arenas. This is probably my favorite consequence when it comes to the Springlocks malfunctioning. Likely because you yourself actually get to experience failure in a way. But obviously not in real life, because that would be awful and horrible and extremely painful. Instead, you experience it in game. So although you can't feel it, you can't imagine what it would feel like, which honestly is also terrifying to do. This time when the Springlocks fail, it is as a result of your movement. You are the one who must wriggle to shake off the mini arenas, which are climbing up the suit and attempting to kinda climb into it with you. If this happens enough times, the mini arena's jump scare will get triggered, implying your death by mini arenas. However, if you also wriggle too much to keep them off you, without winding the Springlocks back up enough, you will trigger the Springlocks release, which will also result in your death by being impaled by suit parts which are released by those Springlocks. Yikes. Number 5. The Fate of Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy is thought by some, in regards to lore, to have been a possible Springlock victim. The consequences of this employee's Springlock failure would be, of course, that they died. That's right, people believe that Shadow Freddy, who appears to be somewhat ghostly in nature, is actually the spirit of a former Freddy's employee, who died while wearing a Springlock Freddy suit. It's believed that for one reason or another, the suit malfunctioned, murdering its wearer. As a result, Shadow Freddy was born to haunt its former workplace, and was also likely one of the reasons that Springlock suits stopped being used, at least temporarily. Although apparently not soon enough, as there were other failures that occurred possibly even after this one. Number 4. The Fate of Rwqfsfasxc. Some believe that not only is Shadow Freddy a victim of the Springlock's failing, but so is the shadowy figure of Rwqfsfasxc. They believe that this shadowy Bonnie was another employee who, instead of being killed by the Springlock Freddy suit, met their end while inside the Springlock Bonnie suit, which also failed. My question is, if these employees happen to both die as a result of wearing and using the Springlock suits and the suits malfunctioning, did they die on the same day? Because if not, why would you ever continue to use these suits as a company? And why would you ever, as an employee, agree to get in another one? Unless one of them was hired after the other one and like no one told them about what happened to the last person to put on one of those suits? Still, legal liability right there. Like, my alarms are going off for like lawsuits. Of course, this was only a theory anyways, and actually one that Scott claimed was incorrect in regards to the true origins of both Shadow Freddy and Rwqfsfasxc.
Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Reaper Spring Bonnie. Reaper Spring Bonnie, however, is the opposite of Shadow Spring Bonnie. This Reaper variant appears in Final Nights 3 and 4 and is an absolute monstrosity, but is definitely more terrifying in Final Nights 4, okay? He is 100% the scariest animatronic in those games. In essence, Reaper Spring Bonnie is a nightmare Springtrap. He has sharp teeth and a very damaged and withered body. His suit is a dark yellow in color, he sports a big purple bow tie on his upper chest, kinda like Glitch Trap does, which is ironic given that this released first, I'm pretty sure. And like other Reaper animatronics, Reaper Spring Bonnie has a pair of hollow dark eyes, kind of like my ex. In Final Nights 4, however, his appearance is much more disfigured and gruesome, with sharper teeth, sharper claws, a different jaw, growths resembling kinda shoulder pads made of fungi, and a gooier appearance overall. He's also missing half of his right ear, kind of like Springtrap. I mean, like, that's kind of like a given at this point. Like, if you're missing half your ear, it's a reference to Springtrap. But oh my god, okay, this thing is more terrifying than Springtrap. Like, this is what Springtrap should have been. Or honestly, what I think a nightmare Springtrap would look like I said. This is like a prototype burn trap in my eyes. Or like a melt trap, which is probably going to be the next iteration of Aton. Proto Trap, though, that's a good one. And ultimately, in at number 2, you. Spoiler alert for a fan game, but if I say which fan game, I'm going to spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, click array right now. You can probably just skip to the next number using the timestamps, okay? Alright. I'll give you a chance to do that, and okay, that's your chance. That's it. You're done. Okay. A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by phisnom on Game Jolt. It was released on the 25th of April 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who's currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of Ace Off is a hybrid between the traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving 5 nights and escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night that they must complete before 6 a.m. and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics, obviously. However, the ending to the game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and being left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock animatronic, which is probably one of the scariest things of all, because I don't know you, but like I'd rather not get Springlocked. It's also revealed that you then play as Aton, so it's kind of a fan character, kind of not, but like it's a fan way of having it happen. All right, good enough for me. And finally, in at number 1, Fredtrap. To be honest, I searched this up just for the hell of it because like originally we thought that Aton was using the golden Freddy suit to kill people, but there are actually Fredbear versions of Springtrap. Fredbear is exactly what you'd expect. Springtrap's look on a yellow Freddy animatronic. The designs are actually really well made and honestly scarier than normal Springtrap for me. And like, I don't know why. I guess like for some reason, when I just think bears are scarier than bunnies. I wonder why. I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how scared Scott was of Bonnie, but that's just idle speculation. That's like my kind of headcanon. There are also even more rundown versions and even scrap versions of Fredtrap, which are already haunting when you don't think about the fact that it would still be William inside the suit being kept alive by the spirit of his dead son. Fredtrap is definitely one of the most strangely horrifying versions of Fredbear or any Springlock animatronic that I've seen. And that's pretty damn impressive. In at 10, Elizabeth Aton. Elizabeth is at the top of this list because, well, she got killed, but she also doesn't really seem to deserve it until after she gets killed, and then she deserves the spring locking. Which, I mean, in a way makes sense, and it's something that I've been using as evidence when it comes to who I think the vengeful spirit is. Because, you know, spirits, when they're, you know, being spirits for longer periods of time, would understandably start to go crazy, or even crazier. And this is an idea that Supernatural, the show, has used in length. And the same idea, though, could be applying to Elizabeth and Crying Child. Just because you start off good or loving your father doesn't mean that you'll continue to see things that way in a few years' time. And Elizabeth, while not deserving a spring locking in 1983 when she dies, definitely deserves one come sister location in FNAF 6. I mean, she literally betrays her brother and sister location, nearly killing him, and then, again, she also betrayed him, and then in FNAF 6, she wants to make her father proud. Her murderous, psychopathic father. She wants to make him proud. Considering how you've been possessing an animatronic that he made that caused you to die, that he made, I think that you would have already made him pretty proud, I guess. It's a damn shame that you turned into this, but whatever. In at 9, Mr. Hippo. Okay, this is kind of a joke number, but also not, because Mr. Hippo is literally the worst thing ever in Ultimate Custom Night. Mr. Hippo is a viable animatronic from FNAF 6 that returns as an antagonist in Ultimate Custom Night. Okay, Mr. Hippo will climb through the duct systems trying to reach one of the 2 hoses in the office. Hoses? Is that right? I don't know. I just copied and pasted that line from the wiki. The player needs to use an audio lure to keep him in place and to move him around so that they can use the heater to push him back, and he is fooled 100% of the time by the audio lure. Also is fooled faster than Helpy Frog. However, most of the scare factor from this animatronic doesn't come from their behavior or their design. This time around, rather, their death lines. Cause you see, Mr. Hippo has a knack for going on about things. A lot. Okay, it's like me on a first date. Still, he will go into like 5-minute long speeches that you have to deal with every time he kills you. Meaning that if you get jump scared, you're boned for enough time to make a sandwich, okay? Which is annoying as hell. Getting killed by him enough will eventually and cause you to end up agreeing with me that he needs to be spring locked. Because you end up knowing what comes after the smoke of the jump scare clears, and it's just pain. In at 8, Roxy. Okay, I know that Roxy and Mr. Hippo are animatronics and incapable of actually feeling pain because of a spring locking, but honestly, I also just hate this kind of person. The self-centered tool bag who only cares about themselves, whether they secretly hate themselves or not. That's not what matters here, okay? Who you are and what kind of person you are is defined by how you treat others and who you are when the pressure is on. And Roxy is just horrible. And while they may not be able to feel pain from the spring locking, at least Roxy will be contained if they got spring locked, okay? And honestly, that's what I need. I don't want to deal with this personality type. I've dealt with enough people like this throughout my life, and I'm still only 22 goddamn years old, which means that I'm really fed up with this shit. So yeah, there's not much else to say with this one other than I want her to be restrained so that I don't have to deal with her. So yeah, that's it. That's the number. What are you still doing here? Go to the next one. And at 7, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurring antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a child is killed outside. He is also the predecessor to both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear. Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts as a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they look slightly similar, the only similarities that he has to Freddy Fazbear is that they're both bears, and they wear a top hat, are brown, and have blue eyes. That's about it. Am I Real's second form is Am I Real, and is a form that resembles Springtrap. This form has a green color much like Springtrap, and contains human remains, because of course it does. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side, and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down. No longer circular like cake bears. He has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs inside. Rips and tears also cover his arms, revealing even more human remains. He appears to be missing at least one finger on his right hand, and is absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, a decent amount of these are going to be from Dormitibus, because like, have you seen the Dormitibus animatronics? They're just horrifying. Speaking of which, in at number 6, Garvey, a psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist to Dormitibus, and as a human, he was a man who killed the missing children, and later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire. That's where these two differ, okay? Garvey is a much more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3, and one that actually dies. However, it is not William Afton, as this game was released before the name reveal, so even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it, right? He crawls on all fours, uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demon crab thing that I did not want in my life. Okay, like, just look at this thing and tell me that it's right. You'll be lying. You're wrong if you think that this is okay. Halfway through into number 5, Breadbear. Breadbear is an animatronic coming from the Day Shift at Freddy series, who was created by Dave by modifying a Fredbear suit. The character appears in Day Shift at Freddy's 1, 2, and 3. Breadbear's appearance is oddly similar to Fredbear, albeit wider, I guess because of the gluten. He is a golden colored bear animatronic wearing a purple top hat and bow tie, and 2 black and white buttons on his chest. He has gray metallic eyes, thicker arms and legs, a squarish brown nose, small brown pupils, small white teeth, round ears, with the insides being a lighter shade of color, and a very circular shaped stomach with brownish shades scattered amongst it. He has rips around his feet joints and arm joints, and he appears for real when Dave modifies an empty Fredbear suit and unleashes it during the Sting operation on Friday, in which, depending on which route you took, it either attempts to kill Jack, dies, or it destroys the entire pizza joint and then sets itself on fire. And you know what? We love that. We love the chutzpah. That's the kind of tactics we need in this cutthroat animatronic world. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Gregory. The way I see it, Gregory is such a stuck-up little shit that he would absolutely deserve to be crushed by metal robotic bits being put in the same place as his bones, because this kid is just a damn menace that seemingly doesn't want to take responsibility for any of his actions. And you know what? None of you hold him accountable either. Gregory orders the robots to disassemble Vanny. Quote, okay? Gregory being willing to kill Vanny is already pretty messed up, but while some would argue self-defense, this is not self-defense. Self-defense requires a reasonable amount of force to be used, okay? Tearing a person limb from limb is not reasonable force. This kid is easily able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation and then use their upgrades on Freddy. He is willing to kill Vanny, like I said, despite actually seemingly knowing her like we see in the best ending, and then he burns Trap multiple times in an attempt to stop him from taking control over Freddy, but again, he's also just setting fire to this thing all the time. So like, what the absolute living hell is this kid doing? And how is he so nonchalant about this whole thing? Okay, this guy literally kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go talk to a destroyed Freddy robot that they can remake. Dude, Vanny's literally bleeding out right next to you. I'm sure that her ribs are just splayed across the floor. Dude, couldn't you have just said like stop Vanny or restrain Vanny? Stop Vanny would have been the easiest one, not freaking disassemble. Okay, you're not panicking about literally anything else in this game. Okay, just say something that doesn't involve a human dying, for God's sakes, okay? Stop Vanny! You're like, dude! Penultimately, in number 2, Henry. Yes, I'm going to continue the Henry hate train. Choo choo, get on board, motherfuckers, because despite how many people try and defend him, I will never stand down. I don't get what Henry's deal is, because he does not kill William at any point in the series, aside from trying to make it look like a fire did it. But William is already considered dead. How would you killing him make things suspicious? so why would you try to cover it up with a fire? For some reason, okay, he seems to be fine offing William's son when he gets the chance though. I mean, in both of the fires that Henry has set that we see, FNAF 3 and FNAF 6, Michael was there both times. And he didn't seem to care that Michael was in the building either time, okay? He doesn't even give Michael the opportunity to leave in FNAF 6 despite there having been a way out planned. Quote from Henry's final speech: "And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out plan for you, I have a feeling that that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be." You have a feeling? What are you, the black eye frickin' peas? He assumes that we also want to die in these halls, but doesn't give us the chance to actually make that decision for ourselves. He just forces us to die, since he doesn't give us a way out. Okay? That's murder! Whether we wanted it or not. Okay, assisted suicide is still illegal in the majority of states, I'm pretty sure, okay? But even then, not giving us the choice, even just assuming that we want it, makes it a murder. Instead of like having the fire burn the building down, or having baby lob his head off, okay? He should have had to suffer a Springlock failure just so that he could see how easy it would have been just to off Afton directly instead of trying to do it like a coward. And finally, in at number 1, Michael Afton. Michael Afton absolutely, in my mind, deserves to have gotten Springlocked instead of simply burning in FNAF 6, okay? Like, sure, he seems to be playing the good guy, going after his father, but in reality, Michael, to me, he's just playing the hero this whole time and not actually doing anything. He says he's trying to right his father's wrongs and whatnot, but even Oliver Queen did more than that, okay? He's not doing it because he's a good person. He's doing it because he feels bad and not because of, like, some higher moral code. He blames himself for getting his brother killed, which I mean is understandable, but then that subsequently means that anything he does to try and like fix the things that his father did is just to make himself feel better about his own mistakes. Because in the end, nothing is gonna bring his little bro back, okay? And he doesn't even really have the stomach to actually stop his father once and for all. He says that he's going to come find him, but then when he does in FNAF 6, he doesn't burn down the place to stop him, okay? Henry does that. Henry is the only one who's actually willing to sack up and try to stop William, even if he does it in a cowardly way, okay? It just shows how not serious Michael is. And if he really wanted to make sure that William was dead, he wouldn't have let himself burn in the FNAF 6 fire, okay? But he does. He lets himself burn, or at least doesn't actually successfully get out of the building so that he won't have to feel the regret of hurting his brother anymore, okay? Because he has the curse of knowledge, since he knows what his father was doing and he doesn't want to deal with it anymore. And you know what? That deserves a spring locking. That's right. I don't care how mad at you are at me in the comments, okay? I don't care. It's true, alright? It's Monday morning, I'm mad. And at 10, moisture sensitive. One of the things that I find to be the absolute dumbest thing about not only these damned suits but also the FNAF series in general is how stupid it is that the spring lock mechanisms inside the spring lock suits fail with moisture. Sure, it explains why William gets spring locked because the room was dripping and whatever, the ceiling was leaking, and it makes everyone confused with Crying Child because he was crying. Despite that not being a spring lock failure, everyone thought it was because he was crying and, you know, moisture. But in actual practice, that is a horribly flawed mechanic. Like, if me breathing and sweating is going to make the metal bits snap on me, why would I do it in a hot robotic suit? That seems like a horrible and stupid idea. Like, yes, okay, put me in a hot and sweaty environment that gets me killed if it gets wet. That's not a liability at all. I get sweaty wearing my freaking Doctor Strange costume, okay? Imagine a giant suit full of metal, okay? That would also be heavy as hell to walk around in too, only making the sweating worse. In at 9, designer. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these Springlock suits were made with pure intentions. By William Afton. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that's not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made, and considering the abilities of Baby and her comrades, we know that they were made in order to kill, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to assume that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. But honestly, if William made the Funtimes with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks, you get me? And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal, bars, cogs, gears, and chains and more into the same space as your body would be made with pure intentions, you should stop watching these videos and go to a therapist. Seriously. I have a number. And it ain't no bonus. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way enough for a human to fit inside is nuts. And while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers or miles, whatever, per hour in huge metal death boxes, so we can't necessarily complain about it. And while yes, they have their faults, there is nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and suit. That's an incredible feat of technology, and I'm sure they play into it with the marketing. Like, I mean, we hear the phone guy tapes from FNAF 3 talking about these things, okay? And he never mentions a bonus or anything like that for you risking your life with one of these damn suits. And even if you end up getting Springlocked, there doesn't really seem to be any compensation package for your loved ones. Hell, if you die, you may not even get your severance. Actually, maybe that's why they do it. Your family can file a lawsuit since, you know, you died on the job, but that's a lengthy court battle against a massive company with a serial killer who has yet to be caught at the front lines. It's not really gonna do much good for your fam. So the fact that you don't get a bonus if you get in one of these suits, let alone get Springlocked, no thanks. It's a red flag. Swipe left. And it's 7, Cassidy. Some say that Cassidy was Springlocked, but honestly, there isn't really much evidence for that. But you know what? If she wasn't, she damn well deserves to be. And why, you ask? How could a little girl who got killed and then go on to possess the killer so he could suffer for all eternity deserve such a fate as a Springlocking? Well, exactly for the reason you listed. Because everyone thinks that Cassidy is the vengeful spirit, aka the one you should not have killed, aka the one who possesses Aton to make him suffer. But when you look at it logically, taking into consideration more than just what Matt Patton says, it would make more sense for Crying Child to be the vengeful spirit. But nobody wants to listen to me. Nobody wants to hear even my suggestions because of Cassidy. The amount of hate that I have gotten in the comments, in my DMs, on TikTok for God's sakes, is more than I have gotten for anything else. Even more than I got for suggesting that Michael was a Crying Child robot. Just because William didn't kill Crying Child directly does not mean that he couldn't possibly blame the man who made the robot and gave it enough power to crush a skull for his death. Because, you know, that wouldn't normally be required. Plus, Cassidy only has significance because you think she's the vengeful spirit. Take that away, and what importance does she have? Exactly. So, just for that, and for hardly anyone being willing to even hear me out, Cassidy damn well deserves it. Honestly, she could be higher on the list, but I wanted to rant about other people a little bit more. So yeah, there you go. And it's 6, FNAF cops. The cops in the FNAF universe are absolutely the most moronic bunch of people I have ever, I guess, not seen, but heard of, honestly. Like, yeah, I get that they couldn't catch William for story purposes, but that seemingly was retconned, since in the first game they said that they had made an arrest. They could have ended it right there. The story could have been over, but they couldn't find the bodies, so they let him go. Yeah, ignore the animatronics that smell like death, are leaking blood and other bodily fluids, and that many parents have compared to reanimated corpses. Those don't have anything to do with this scenario. Yeah, totally. And even when they find baby's blueprints and see that she has a child storage tank, they don't do anything more than question him. Quote, "There's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state of the art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those." Dude, arrest him! And search the bloody, rotten body smelling animatronics. God damn it, how hard is this? Okay, if it's a crime scene or a suspected crime scene, come on, if it's a crime scene, you don't need to have a warrant, for fuck's sakes, okay? They all deserve Springlockings for the sheer stupidity alone. I'm surprised that they didn't crawl into one and then get killed by it just because they're that damn stupid. In it for Vanessa. I feel like this one is kind of obvious, and you may get mad at me for saying this, but Vanessa deserves to be Springlocked, man, okay? You're probably thinking, but she's possessed, you moron. She doesn't have control over her actions. But that's the thing. She does. Vanessa has no willpower to sacrifice herself for the greater good, okay? At this point, I think that it's safe to infer that Jeremy from FNAF VR didn't go crazy because he just saw a glitch trap. It's fairly reasonable to say that he got possessed. Tape Girl hadn't broken glitch trap into the tape escapes yet, and he was probably just able to possess whoever he wanted. So if Jeremy did get possessed, and the possession worked in a similar way that it does with Vanessa, which would make sense, Jeremy would at times be sentient and in control of his own body. So if he knew about Glitch Trap, maybe he didn't cut his face off because he was freaking out like he had just taken like the Epsom salt, because you use it in the bath. Maybe he did it to try and kill the monster that was inside of him. Okay, so if Vanessa had the gall, Aton wouldn't really have a vessel. Okay, especially since the VR game at this point was probably abandoned. But she won't do it. So she deserves to be springlocked. Paperwork. One of the worst things for the survivors after a springlock failure has to be the paperwork that is associated with it, because goddamn. Someone dying in your building is one thing. Someone dying in your building because of something in your building is another. And then add on to that the fact that they were your employee and probably forced into that suit without because of their contract, and you'll be filing reports until you have to retire. Okay, especially because one mistake on those papers means like even more paperwork, and I don't really know anyone who likes to do paperwork. Personally, I hate it, but that's also because my ADHD makes me it makes it unbearable for me, honestly. Like, it's even tough to write scripts sometimes, but I mean, eventually I have to, but like that's where my brain thrives, you know, in that stressful environment, which is not good for my health. But if it was that kind of paperwork, I would honestly just quit, because there was no way in hell that I would even want to attempt to keep my focus on that when I can just scroll through TikTok or YouTube instead. So yeah, no thanks. But ultimately, in at number 2, replaced. Oh yeah, don't forget your bones being replaced with metal ones. Yeah, like sure, there's surgery for people who need repairs or replacements, okay? I think like hip replacements are probably the most common actually. However, those have whole processes behind them to ensure a fast recovery and, you know, survival, not being infected. All of a sudden being shoved full of metal bones where normal ones used to be, that's a guaranteed infection at the very least, especially considering how, you know, your normal bones have to go somewhere else. And whether they're just crushed and then spread out inside you or just pushed out the other side, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of pain. Plus, you know, probably not alive, which I guess is a good thing, since you won't really have to deal with the intense pain for too long, hopefully. But this actually makes me think, if you replace all of your bones with metal ones, are you still you? Is this like a Ship of Theseus moment? Am I about to have like a WandaVision finale? Or like, are we just our brain? And if we are our brain, does that mean that if we have a brain transplant, do we become another person despite it still being my body? And does that mean that we're just like a brain piloting a bone mech with meat armor? Oh no, existential crisis. And finally, in at number 1, death. I mean, don't get me wrong, okay? But the worst thing about a springlock failure has to be the whole death part, right? Ignore my mumbling. I mean, honestly, okay, it's obviously not for some of you, given the whole comments thing earlier, but the only reason you wouldn't die in a springlock suit is because you're a main character and need to be around for the story. And then you're just in agonizing pain for the rest of your life. Yeah, the only people who have survived a springlock failure, well, confirmed, is William. So, yeah, and you know, he's like the main antagonist of the game and was only able to survive since the spirit of a victim was keeping him alive. And in the books, William also ended up getting springlocked before, but then got out of the suit, since Dave Miller, who is revealed to be William, has scars from a previous springlock failure from before he becomes Springtrap in the books. So the only one who can ever really survive seems to be William, and he's survived it twice. Anyone else is boned, and personally, I'd rather not die by having millions of small metal bits and several dozen large ones shoved into my body, trying to replace my body. I would rather die peacefully in my sleep with Chica's hand around my throat. And it's 7, required. The springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they didn't really need to create. Like, these things are hella deadly, and both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them. Like, goddamn, okay? Just make a separate suit for the animatronic characters, for the employees, okay? Like, the people who run your business. You know, they are the ones who make you the money, so, you know, they don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing their internal organs. OSHA would have been all over these goddamn suits if it was real in this universe, but apparently I guess it's not. And honestly, it's probably required by your contract to wear these suits at work. And if you refuse, you're probably gonna get fired, especially considering how they started getting ready to fire Jeremy because he saw Glitch Trap and Help Wanted. So why wouldn't they fire you for not wearing your suit if it's in your contract? Even if you claim it was to protect your life, they'd find another reason that you couldn't really fight against. So especially, you know, when a serial killer is the CEO. And its 6 implications. Now, while the term Springlock is used in real life, it's totally different from the actual FNAF mechanism. I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from Springlocks and You, How Not to Die Remastered. It's a thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs, okay? From my research, what I gathered is that a Springlock in real life is, in simplest terms, a spring lock. It's like if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real spring locks or just ends up bringing you back or quotes this page, so it's kind of circular logic, okay? You can't use evidence within the thing that you're trying to prove as proof that it is real. It's like plugging a power bar into itself. It doesn't work. You can't use the same article to prove that spring locks are real, okay? Because they're not. At least their game form isn't. But if the spring lock failure was real, I think the implications of like all of this being real in general is like one of the worst things. You get it? Like it's definitely in the top 10. Get it? It's a little meta content joke for you because this is a top 10 list. It's in the top 10. Halfway through into number 5, comments. I've mentioned this in previous videos, mostly to explain why there won't ever be an actual real FNAF restaurant that you'll be able to walk into, and it still remains true since we're only getting a virtual diner that you can only order online. However, I think that one of the worst things still, and especially when it comes to these suits, is the goddamn comments about them. You wanna know a comment that I saw yesterday? Well, yesterday for me as I was writing this, Wednesday for you. Okay, I saw someone say that they want to be springlocked. What? Why? Why would you want to be springlocked? Do you know how messed up that is? You're saying that you want to be killed by this thing? Because there's some hotlines that you should call. Like, why on sweet heaven's earth would you want to be springlocked? Do you know how absolutely agonizingly painful that would be? That would be one of the worst things imaginable, okay? Holy sweet Lord baby Jesus W. Christ. That would be one of the worst ways to go, if not the worst way. At least like as far as like actually could happen goes, I think at least, okay? Because like a volcano would suck, but it's a bit unrealistic. It's a bad idea, okay? Stop doing this. Stop saying this. Okay, talk to a doctor.
Number 3, Payback. Going back to the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the 1:35 a.m. book, Kelsey, wasn't the only one to get springlocked in the story. When Devin returns to the abandoned Freddy's to see if Kelsey might still be alive, he notices the suit is empty. He thinks he sees something further inside, and so he decides to reach into the mouth of the suit, only for the suit to seemingly clamp down on his arm. Of course, you should never do that. If you see something and you're like, oh, maybe I'll put my arm in this thing where my arm could get stuck, don't do it. The more he struggles, the more he seems to get sucked into the suit. Sure, this isn't so much a springlock failure from the inside, you know, and no one's wearing the suit in some of these. It's more reminiscent of the bite of 83, because I don't think there was anyone in that suit. But this is still a springlock suit failing. So, while different, I still consider it to be a failure with consequences. Consequences being, you know, Devin also likely died. Number 2, the bite of 83. Definitely among the most memorable springlock failures is the bite of 83. Now some of you are gonna say, Amanda, this is not a springlock failure. There was no one in that suit that we know of, which sure. But still, it's a springlock suit and it failed, so I'm counting it. Anyways, I feel like the bite of 83 hasn't been fully confirmed really at all, but many theorize it to be true. Many theorize that our theory is true, that we have so far, because this is all we got, alright? We grab all these little Easter eggs and then we do our best to try to figure out what's going on in the narrative. Now, why do we believe that this could even be a springlock failure? Well, 1, the crying child was crying when he was held up to give Fredbear a kiss, which many theorize is the reason the jaws of the animatronic bear clamped down, as a result of the tears making the gears wet and causing a springlock malfunction. 2, we have been led to believe that Breadbear was a springlock suit, so that's also why people suspect that the bite of 83 could also be a springlock malfunction. Number 1, multiple. While Shadow Freddy and Rwqfsfasxc may have been debunked as springlock failure victims by Scott himself, this theory didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, many thought that they were among those generally referred to in FNAF 3 during Phone Guy's recording for night number 4. Here, Phone Guy mentions that the springlock suits are being discontinued as a result of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous springlock failures, which I gotta say, it makes sense to me too, because I'm like, what were all these multiple Springlock failures? What does that entail, and how many were there? Oh boy.